All right, so this video is for page 2 of the notes for section 6.4. We've done translations, transformations of sine and cosine functions. We've done stretching in the vertical direction with amplitude. We've stretched and shrunk horizontally with changes in period. We did phase shift, where the whole thing just shifts to the left or to the right. And now we're going to do our last type of translation, and it is the vertical shift. So we're translating up or down in this case. So this is really probably the easiest thing to worry about. It is with K. So the thing at the end, K, that is how much you're going to shift up or down. If it's positive, we're shifting up. So like here, the parent function is this gray one, and then plus 2 just means we're shifting up 2. Okay, so the baseline. So the baseline was the x-axis, and now the baseline shifts up, and everything shifts up above that. So what I would suggest doing is when you first do this, dash in this new baseline, and then the points are either going to start, they're going to oscillate above and below that baseline. So in this case, it was sine, so it starts on the baseline, ends on the baseline, halfway between it's on the baseline, goes up and goes down. So it oscillates about the baseline. So draw that baseline in first. And also what you should probably do is, so we have 4 things that we're looking for here. We're looking for A, what's A? We're looking for what's the period. We're looking for the phase shift. And we're looking for the vertical shift for each one of these. Now, some of these things might be 1. They may not have changed. So like the amplitude might still be 1. But still, these are the 4 things that you have to be concerned with when you go to graph these things. All right. So in this case, amplitude, or A, is 2. The period, B, is 1. So the period is just still 2 pi. The phase shift is negative pi. And the vertical shift is negative 1. So we have, and I'm going to do sort of a dash thing here. And again, you can see down below, we're not going to be really graphing these on graph paper, but this first example is on a graph paper. All right, so that's the first thing I start with, is the baseline. Then I think about the phase shift. So it's a cosine, so we're normally one above the baseline, but now that's 2, so we're 2 above the baseline, and but the phase shift is negative pi. So let's just go with our usual, I think, 6 things. So we'll call this negative pi here, and so we're on the baseline, we're over at negative pi, we should go up 2. So let's move that to negative pi over here, because it's just about where I want to go up. So I'm not going up to 2, I'm going 2 above the baseline. So I'm going over to negative pi, and I'm going up 1, 2 units. We're assuming of course that this is 1, and then that is negative 1, right? So we're using the same kind of scale. So we go up 2 units, 1, 2, we're up here, okay? And then we want to go over 2 pi, so 1 period, so 2 pi, so we go over to, that's a pi over, and then another pi over. So here and then here, right? So this is, I'm going to put it down here because I know my point is going to be up here, okay? So we start above because it's positive 2, and we start above over here as well. Okay, halfway between, we're going to be 2 below, so 1, 2, 2 below the baseline. So I'm here, down at negative 3. Halfway between, of course, we are on the baseline. That would be here. Okay. All right, and then, oh, sorry. Put my zeros in the wrong spot. Not at 0, but on the baseline. Yeah. Okay. All right, does that make sense? So we're oscillating above and below the baseline. So we're 2 above, we come down, we're to the baseline, we're 2 below the baseline, we go back up to the baseline, and then we go 2 above the baseline. Okay, so let's go on to example 3. Let's write out all of our stuff. A, the period, the phase shift, and the vertical shift. All right, A is -1. The period is 2 pi divided by 2, so that's pi. Then we want to look at the phase shift. The phase shift is 0 because there's no constant next to this. And then the vertical shift is down 3. Okay. So I'm going to want to I've just got to create a scale here. I'm going to call this going down 3. That's my baseline. So that's -3. And phase shift to pi. So let's go ahead and put in our y-axis. And then so let's just say those are 2 units. And so there. So through or 3 below, we're oscillating, 1 above and below. So we're oscillating 1 and 1 above, 1 below my baseline here at -3. All right. Phase shift is 0. So we're going to, no, it's cosine, and it's negative. So we're going to start right here. And then we want to go a period away. And that period is pi. So I'm going to go over to pi. So let's call this pi. And I'm also going to be 1 below the baseline. Halfway between, just put them all up here, pi over 2, and that's 1 above the baseline. And then at pi over 4 and 3 pi over 4, we're on the baseline at both of those. Okay, so you want to clearly mark, of course, where your 5 points are. This, of course, is 0 here, and then sketch that in. Okay. All right, next one. We want to sort of rewrite this. So this will be, let me write it up above here, y equals 3. Let's rewrite that so that it's obvious. I mean, you first look, you might think that A is 3 because it's out in front, but they were just sneaky and rewrote that. So cosine, and then let's factor out a 1/2, x minus pi, and then plus 3 at the end. So that's in kind of the form that we're used to. All right. So A is 1. The period is 2 pi divided by 1/2, so 4 pi. Phase shift. Phase shift is positive pi. And the vertical shift is 3. So again, let's kind of go, we'll just call this 3 going above. So my baseline went up 3. And I'm just going to put a 3 out in front there. Our phase shift is pi. So let's go ahead and just put in our y-axis. Our phase shift is pi. So I'm going to start here at pi. And then I'm going to go 4 pi away. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, so that we're roughly to scale. So that's 5 pi, 4 pi away. Cut that in half, that's 3 pi, that's 2 pi, and that's 4 pi. Okay, it's cosine, so we're going to be above the base, it's a positive 1, so we're 1 above. Just put in a tick marks there. So we're starting 1 above. We're going to end at 5 pi, 1 above. 3 pi, we're 1 below. And then on the baseline, on the baseline. Okay, so sketch that in. Okay. All right, let's go on to number 5. This one doesn't really need to be rewritten. It's kind of in the form that's already useful to us. So our A, our period, our phase shift, and our vertical shift. Find those, fill those in. All right, our A is 3. Our period isn't changing, it's 2 pi. Our phase shift is positive pi. And we have a vertical shift of -1. So our baseline, let's call it here, going down -1. Let's go ahead and put in our y-axis, and let's put in some units. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So it's cosine. So we're starting above. So we're going to go, our phase shift is pi. So let's go over to pi. I don't know, here, let's call it pi. And we're going to start 3 above the baseline. So we're at 1, 2, we're at 2 above. 1, 2, 3 above, so we're at 2. And then we want to go a period away, so we should be at 3 pi. So let's see, that's pi, that's another pi, that's another pi. So we're at 3 pi. And that's also 2 above. Halfway between, we're at 2 pi. I'm going to put that up above because it's out of our way then. 3 below, 1, 2, 3, we're down here. Down at -4. And then halfway between these things, again, got to mark, you got to indicate that you know what all those locations are. This will be 3 pi over 2, and this will be 5 pi over 2. Okay, and those were on the baseline. Okay, so sketch those in. A little flat there at the top. Okay. All right, next one, number 6. Again, let's rewrite this so that it's in a form that we can use. Y equals sine, factor out a 4/3 x. That leaves us with plus pi over 2. All right, pause the video, write down what your 4 things are. A, period, phase shift, and vertical shift. So pause the video, write those down. All right, A is 1. The period is 2 pi divided by 4/3. That's 3 pi over 2. Phase shift is negative pi over 2. Vertical shift is 1. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and put my vertical shift in first. Draw in my baseline. Let's start with negative pi over 2. We want to go a period away, so that should take us over to, so it's 3 halves of pi, so I'm going to go over to 0, that would be a half a pi, and then another half of pi would be positive pi. It would be positive pi over 2, so then another half would just be pi. So 3 halves of pi added to pi over 2 is just pi. All right, and then halfway between, again, this would be helpful to think of as 2 pi over 2, so that we get a common denominator. But halfway between these two is going to be pi over 4. All right, and then of course now it's nice to think of this as 4 pi over 4. 4 pi over 4, and that gives us a 5 pi, halfway between 5 pi over 8, and then halfway between these is, again, think of this one as negative 2 pi over 4, so that we can add these and divide by 2. So that gives us negative pi over 8. Okay, so that kind of helps us. Now we want to put in our vertical. It's going to be clearly between these two. It's going to be somewhere here, a little closer to the negative pi over 8. So let's draw it in right here. All right, and now we'll put our scale in. We're going to go one above, so we'll call this 2. So we're oscillating. I put A equals A equals 1. There's a little bit of a glare on my paper when I'm looking at it with this light. So 1. So I'm going to go 1 above, 1 below. So I'm going to oscillate between 0 and 2. Okay, so let's start our phase shift. We're going to start sine, so we're starting on the baseline. We're going to finish on the baseline, halfway between on the baseline. It's positive 1, so first we're going up to 2, and then going down to 0 here. All right, and sketch that in. Okay. A little wonky here. I think I got a little too flat. Let's kind of try to make that a little bit more curvy. Okay. All right, we've got 2 more to do then. So number 7. And again, we could rewrite that. This is negative 2 sine of 1/2 x, and then minus 2. Okay, so let's write what we have. We have A equals negative 2. We have a period, and that period is going to be 4 pi. It's going to be 2 pi divided by 1/2, or 4 pi. The phase shift, in this case, there is no constant next to that x, so the phase shift is 0, and the vertical shift is negative 2. All right, so let's go ahead and just put in our baseline, our midline, down here at negative 2. We're starting on the y-axis this time, so our phase shift is 0, so we can just start there. Sine, so we're right on the baseline. I know I'm starting right there. 0. We're going to go over to 4 pi, and again, I'm on the baseline, halfway between 2 pi on the baseline. All right, the A is negative 2, so we're going to go down to, let's make some marks here. So we're going down to, I'm just going to call that out as negative 4, so it's obvious. And that location is pi, and this location is 3 pi. All right, so we start it down because it's A is negative 2, and then over here at 3, we're 2 above, so we're at the baseline again. Not the baseline, but at the x-axis. All right, so now we sketch that in. And something like that. Oh, that got a little ugly. Again, it is a little easier if you can move your paper around. You know, it's kind of hard to go upside down with paper being steady. All right, and then the last one. Why don't you pause the video and write out, rewrite this, so it's in the form, write out your 4 things, and find your 5 locations. Okay, so when I rewrite this, I'm going to write it up above here, so let me kind of do that. All right, so y is equal to 2 cosine, we're going to factor a 2 out, x plus pi over 4. When I distribute that back in, of course, I'll get pi over 2. And then I'm going to put my plus 1 at the end. All right. You know, it doesn't really matter that I put the plus 1 at the end versus the beginning, but just, when you see that number out in front, I just don't want anyone to confuse that with A. So it kind of just rewrite it at the end, makes it a little bit more obvious. Okay, so our A is 2. Our period is 2 pi divided by 2, so our period is pi. Phase shift, that's equal to negative pi over 4. Vertical shift, that's equal to positive 1. All right, so I'm going to draw in my vertical shift to start with. 1 up. Go ahead and label the first thing negative pi over 4. And then I want to go a period away. So period away, let's call that 3 pi over 4. That gives me a total of a period. Halfway between these will be pi over 4. So obviously halfway between here, I can draw in my y-axis, that will be 0. And then halfway between these, pi over 2. Okay, cosine, so we're going to start, and it's positive A, so we're starting above. Let's see, that's, what do we say, that's 1, so let's kind of mark off some values. That's going to be 3 up here. My 0 is kind of in the way. Let me move that. So using kind of the same scale, that's negative 1. So our values are going to oscillate between negative 1 and 3, up 2, down 2 from the baseline of 1. Okay, our starting point, that shifted over to negative pi over 4, but A is positive, so we're up at 3. Okay, and then at the end, we're also up at 3, 2 above the baseline. Halfway between at pi over 4, sometimes the label is kind of in the way. I'm going to move that up to pi over 4. It's down here at negative 1. And then halfway between, we're on the baseline. Okay, and then sketch that in. Okay, perfect. Now, remember too that this thing continues on, right? And it continues on over here. We're just asking you to plot one period. So even though this would continue, we just want you to find that, use the phase shift to find your first critical value, and then go a period away, cut it in half, then cut those each in half to get our 5 key values and locations, our key points, locations, so that way we can see at least one period. Now, when you do the homework, again, sometimes it will ask you to graph over a different domain rather than just one full period, but just do one full period. So, if it's asking you to graph, but don't graph based on the domain that it's asking for. Always, for us, graph for one full period. So use your phase shift to find your first critical value, right? And then it's either above, below, or on the baseline. And then find your other 4 points as well using your period. All right, so this is the homework. Do next class.